I got my coffee. I got an hour to record and upload this. Let's get it. Rainbow Six Siege 2. This is a topic that has been floating around for the past couple of years. A lot of people have floated this as a potential solution to the problems that the game currently faces. That, frankly, you know, as far as I can tell, I know some game devs might disagree with me if they have more experience with that sort of thing than me. But as far as I can tell, the code base for Siege is too old to be a mainstream competitive title. So that means that you're going to have to port it. You're going to have to do the Overwatch treatment. You're going to have to do the Counter-Strike treatment. Now, there's a number of ways that Rainbow Six Siege could do this. They could Overwatch it. That is, they put a 2 on the end of it, and then they just port everything over and then say, yeah, this is free to play. The reason probably that they can't go free to play right now, obviously, has to do with the cheaters situation. If the game was free to play, then the cheaters would just be completely out of control. Well, they are completely out of control, but well, then they would just effectively kill the game for good. I mean, again, every time I use a very dramatic way to describe a situation, it's like, no, the game is dead. They can't kill it because they already killed it. Okay, I get it. I understand. I get the concept, all right? But this is a Siege channel, so if I don't upload Siege, then I don't make any money. Sorry. Anywho, the point is, I think the game needs a sequel. I don't think it needs necessarily a Rainbow Six Siege 2. They could do the Counter-Strike treatment where they just inject the new version of the game into the previously existing one and just say, hey, this is like a massive title update. So if that is something they would like to do, they might not even change the name. I think if they look at the situation that Overwatch got itself in, the whole idea of putting a 2 at the end of your game to make it seem like a sequel to generate marketing hype, that is a tactic that failed. Overwatch is still doing relatively well. They had a spot at DreamHack when I went relatively recently. So that game isn't necessarily dead. I know a lot of people like to throw the word dead around for any hobby that is enjoyed by a substantial amount of people that doesn't necessarily have massive worldwide market penetration to the extent that they would like. And they say it's dead because it's not as popular as some things. Silly way to put it. Overwatch is not dead, but it's clear that the way they handled the marketing for that game did not help the numbers. And so the potential that the game could have had was certainly not achieved. Counter-Strike, on the other hand, much more successful example. Again, some people will, because, you know, gaming YouTube, everything sucks. Game is dead. Game is done for, right? Like, we reinvented tabloid journalism, everybody, isn't it? That's awesome. Isn't that so cool? I don't know what's going on with the cheater thing in Counter-Strike. Apparently, it's not pretty at high elo. But apparently, if you're, you know, hovering a little bit underneath, let's say, you know, you're playing Premier, and for the most part, competitive, you're not going to run into them as much as Siege, certainly. Now, if you want something that's relatively cheater-free, Valorant is the only option you have in terms of competitive FPS games, esports-focused FPS games with an involved ladder system. You're going to have to register for social credit score. John Cena will be looking through your emails very soon, but you won't have to play against cheaters. So as far as I can tell, people are willing to make that sacrifice, and people will be willing to make that sacrifice with Rainbow Six Siege. For a long time, I was under the impression that the anti-cheat situation was just going to constantly have, you know, the can kicked down the road because the audience for Siege is going to look at something like a kernel level, well, a more intrusive or a more involved, an in-house kernel level anti-cheat that might require a system restart. Hey, just saying, it might happen. I don't know if it will. It could very well possibly happen. Something like that added to the game would certainly drive a lot of players away because of security concerns. However, I don't think that population would be enough to put a dent in the marketing plan. I think the vast majority of people right now would very, very much like to play ranked without playing against cheaters. Next update, if they implement something like Rainbow Six Firewall or something, I don't know, anything at all to address the situation, regardless of whether there is content or there is not. I think most people would be happy to hear that. Because as far as I am concerned, I feel like the base game is very fun to play. The current version of Siege that I am playing in my 10-man server, in Staff Hub, without cheaters, is very enjoyable. I appreciate the combination of tactical and strategic gameplay I feel like we are finally getting to the vision that Ubisoft wants for the game, which is that beautiful kind of half and half fusion of strategic thinking and precise, really involved, snappy gunplay. I don't mean snappy like a lot of input, right? Like bolo leaning and stuff like that. I mean snappy like fast time to kill, headshots, really, really fun tactical shooter, comp shooter, fusion gameplay. Rainbow Six Siege has too many moving parts. It has too much invested in it for Ubisoft to just take it out back like a dog and whack it in the back of the head. To let it have, you know, an undignified exit from the scene. I don't think the Ubisoft devs are lying when they say they want to get to 100 operators. I believe this game one day will have 100 operators. It's just a matter of, can we keep a player base by the time we get to 100 operators? And as far as I can tell, the only way to do that is to address the cheating thing. You cannot address the cheating situation with the current hardware that the game has, because the old code base is not something that can be taught to new staff. So new developers come onto the project, and then they have to work from the ground up, right, to learn this whole thing all over again. Then, if they have a solution to a cheating thing, they can't inject that into the game code, because the game's code is so spaghettified that they will fuck shit up, right? They will break parts of the game and then just make the problem even worse. So we have a very, very frustrating situation on our hands that cannot be fixed overnight. What would happen if Ubisoft did do a Siege 2.0? They would have to remake every single asset from the top down. That means every Pizza Mozzie skin. That means every weapon. That means every texture. That means every map, okay? Every piece of information that takes up data within your operating system, right, when you boot up the game, every single piece of data has to be recontextualized for a new engine, for a new whatever. So, given the size and scale of the game, because it's already over 100 gigs, this is going to be very, very difficult if they decide to do this. If they have been doing this, and they haven't been telling us, it would certainly be a much more welcome explanation than what we got, which was the Rainbow Six membership and a recruit rework that didn't really amount to a rework. That would explain why we're not getting a new map. That would explain why the pace of content is tremendously low compared to how it was. Because if they keep adding stuff, if they keep adding things, it's going to overload the plane. This is the analogy that I keep using. So I don't know if you guys have seen American Made. Great movie with Tom Cruise. Little, like a Narcos kind of deal. He runs cocaine for the CIA and for Pablo Escobar. Crazy fucking movie. But there's a good scene where the cartel wants to keep, you know, somebody from the cartel on the plane to keep an eye on the product. And he's a big fella, all right? He's a big lad, a large member, if you will, to be polite. And bro can't go on the plane. And the cartel is, you know, kind of angry about that, right? Because, you know, you're supposed to follow our rules kind of thing. But the problem is that the plane already has so much crap on it. You cannot add more weight. If you add more weight, you're not going to be able to get enough clearance on the runway for the plane to take off. This is a physics problem. You have to have a certain power to weight ratio for this thing to get enough lift, to generate enough lift under the wings for it to come off of the runway. Otherwise, it's going to crash into the tree line. So, if Rainbow Six Siege were to become Rainbow Six Siege 2 or Rainbow Six Siege again or Rainbow Six Coalition or whatever they decide to do, whatever they decide to call it, they cannot overload the plane. They cannot keep adding crap to the existing architecture that they have, because all of the content, every single piece of it, has to be reconstructed for the new thing. So this would not be easy, and the problem is compounded by the fact that people are getting very impatient. There hasn't been a ton of communication directly from Ubisoft. Actually, there hasn't been any communication from Ubisoft on this particular point. Content is coming out, and there doesn't seem to be an acknowledgement of the severity of the issue. There's an acknowledgement that there is an issue, but they are not, you know, there isn't a constant line of communication in the way that I think some people would like. Now, at the same time, I'm not really sure what the PR department can do other than what they're already doing. They have Alexander Karpazis going up with every single content update, every single season that they release, the press release that they put out, where it's like, we're so excited to blah, 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 Rainbow Six Siege, right? He goes up there and he says, here's what we're doing with the anti-cheat. But again, that anti-cheat on the current Siege base is only going to do so much. The current Siege base is easily compromised because it is so accessible. You have so many people targeting it because it is accessible. It is a compounding problem. It is a chaotic snake that consumes itself. It is not going to get any better until something drastic is done. The only things that I can see are Ubisoft cutting off their contract with BattlEye and then incorporating something else, maybe before the end of the year. That'd be cool to see. I would like that. I'm not sure how anti-cheats work in that particular kind of engineering sense. Maybe they can, maybe they can tell BattlEye to piss off, and then they can inject something else now. I'm not sure. But as far as I can tell, if they want to get this game to 100 operators, they have to do something. So it's not a matter of if, right, in terms of restructuring the game, it is a matter of necessity. So one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to do what they need to do to get the game to 100 operators, or the game is dead. That's all there is to it. Now, this does give the developers a new opportunity to try out some new things. It gives them the opportunity to breathe new life into the series, to try and mix up the Siege formula, to do something that isn't commonly seen, that we've seen at least for the past 8 years. One of these things that I think they're going to approach the game with mechanically is the movement and the animations. I think that the game is starting to show its age with a lot of the animations. One of the things that I was really impressed by the first time that I played Valorant, right? Which a lot of people don't like because it's, the anime uwu game. But aside from that, I was really impressed with Valorant's artistic style, and I was really impressed with its production quality, namely the animations. The animations are a little bit cartoony and a little bit played up, but they're played up in like an anime kind of action movie flair. There's lots of satisfying clicks and clacks and bumps and sort of finesse that the operator uses the weapon with. It's not, realistic per se, but it's cinematic and it fits the tone of Valorant. Siege has a ton of animations where it's clear that the people working on the game, were doing it because they were given an assignment. One of the most egregious examples that my firearms autism picks up on, like a heat-seeking missile, are any AR-15 derived platform weapons where the guy will operate it with the charging handle in the back instead of slapping the bolt release on the side. Both of these, right, effectively do the same thing, but one of these is taught, right, for people who participate in combat much more than the other one. One, it's faster, so that's obviously more efficient. Duh. Two, it's a much more simple behavior, and in high-stress situations, it is easier to do than finagling it with your fingers, right? It's a lot easier to just fucking, right? Than to wrap your fingers around it, pull it back, then release it, right? That's 3 motions. You keep more consistent grip on the weapon, and you can look down your sight picture while you're doing it. 3, you can do it without changing your firing grip, which is really, really fucking handy, right? When you are sighted on something a distance away, you don't want to fuck with what you just done, right? As soon as you reload it, then you have to reset it all over again. This is stuff like you and me, we're not going to notice the stuff because we're not soldiers, but people who do this kind of stuff are going to interact with these devices in the most efficient way possible. And there are tons of animations in the game, some of them, I think, relatively appropriate, but there's also some where I'm like, okay, I can tell that, they were working on a video game, and that's fine. Look, Counter-Strike didn't have, like, super John Wicky animations. It still doesn't, really, but it gets the job done. Not everybody, believe it or not, who works on an FPS game is somebody with military experience, right? A lot of people just, think this stuff is cool, and they want to work on a game about it. And that's fine, that's totally cool. But I think if we are going to go into this approach here from a marketing perspective, as made exemplified by One in the Chamber, right? For instance, that was one example. When the guy, Joshua Mills, the one of the new project leads, was talking to the audience about this at Invite with the big press release that they did, he described the situations with the weapons as lethal and less than lethal. And that kind of, that made my antenna perk up a little bit, because I don't think people will use that kind of terminology for something, unless it's appropriate. So I'm not sure what Mr. Josh's background is, but that was interesting to me. I'm not necessarily saying, that he was a Navy SEAL or something. I'm not a CIA analyst, right, pulling out his file. I'm not Jane Ryan. I just thought that was interesting because it tells me internally the team is okay with approaching the game this way. Now, because the internet is the internet and it's all gone to shit. There is a point at which Ubisoft, will never, ever, ever get some members of the original, whatever you want to call it, original Siege audience back because they're Ubisoft and they exist. But for the people who are not completely insane, I think that there's an opportunity here to, take the Insurgency Sandstorm audience, for instance, and mesh it with, I won't say Valorant, mesh it with the Counter-Strike audience. How about that? I think there is overlap. I think there is a place for this kind of game to exist in a sporting sense, and I think that's what they're trying to do with Rainbow Six. I think they want Rainbow Six to be a tactical shooter, first and foremost. That's what they've said, right? They've said it again and again. That is their particular platform, right? That is their, if they were running for office, that is their policy statement. They want Rainbow Six Siege to be a tactical shooter. So fuck K, right? Like, fuck the 4chan boards that are like, yeah, it's only a tactical shooter if I have to, simulate shitting and pissing in a trench. Otherwise, it's not tactical. It's not a real man's game or something, right? That audience is not our target demographic. Our target audience is general comp shooter fans, like Counter-Strike fans, and dad shooter guys, SOCOM guys. So a lot of people, their eyes roll in the back of their head when I talk about this stuff because they're like, who cares? I just want the game to be good. But when we're talking about Rainbow Six Siege or Rainbow Six Siege 2, if that is happening, from a marketing perspective, that is an appropriate way to approach the conversation. Something else that I think Ubisoft could leverage here, if they had a more sophisticated engine to work with, is obviously the graphical fidelity. I think the game would look a little bit prettier, and maybe they could introduce night maps again. The main issue that people had with night maps was the competitive disadvantage of the lighting. But now, that's not really an issue anymore. I think that they could find a way to keep it presentable and make it look nice and have that kind of, that little extra flavor without taking away from the experience. It would give Ubisoft the ability to expand on the destruction tech. So more sophisticated physics, the game would be able to calculate more sophisticated destruction, which might open up more avenues of play. You could play around with the different calibers a little bit more in terms of the destruction and the way that they interact with the environment. It would give Ubisoft less limitations with their operator designs. This season, we're not really getting a ton of operators. One of those reasons, right, I think is because of the loading the plane analogy. The other reason, I think, is because they might be limited by the constraints of the hardware that they're working on to come up with new stuff. They probably can't implement some ideas because they are being held back by the restrictions this code base is giving them. So that would open up a lot more opportunities. And I think that would be hugely beneficial to injecting new life into the game and, getting a new audience out of it. That would be a perfect opportunity to do a ton of marketing for brand new characters that are completely shaking up the game in ways that we haven't seen before. What if Ubisoft could use the tech of the observation blocker, for instance? What if that had a status effect similar to how you walk through a Viper wall and that gives you a decay? You could do this for intel pings, EMP pulses that disable gadgets. It's like a super Aruni, but just hear me out. We have Grimsby's. What if an attacker could control a swarm of these nano drones remotely, and the drones could go through small surfaces like holes in a wall, drone holes? What if the nano droids could be separated into different pieces so they could gather information from different angles? These are examples of things that I think Rainbow Six Siege could do if they had more sophisticated tech, but right now, we're just kind of limited to playing with the tools in our sandbox in a very constrained way, right? We have info gather, fire, bulletproof glass, or the transparency and lack thereof, and that's kind of it. EMPs, we have a number of different EMPs too. The actual sandbox of mechanics that we have could use a little bit of fresh life, in my opinion. So it's coming to the end of the month, and I've done 22 YAP sessions. I was gonna do 30. Turns out that was just not gonna happen with me juggling time between different projects. The point of these videos was to prove that I could get a decent baseline amount of income without having to put in a shit ton of work. And some people might hear that and they'll actually probably get irritated by it because it will imply that I'm phoning it in, or I'm not concerned about this channel, or I'm not concerned about my audience, or whatever, yada yada. The point of me pursuing different creative outlets professionally was to create a fire escape in case Rainbow Six Siege did not go well. And the only way to do that, in the modern age of algorithmic entertainment with audience capture is to start over. So that's what I did. I stopped complaining. I stopped blaming things. I had a number of personal awakenings about who I was and what I wanted out of my professional career. And I decided I'm not going to blame anything but myself from here on out for anything else. If I have to put everything away and get a 9-to-5, just like a lot of people have to do, right? A lot of people gotta work for a living. Not everybody gets to be a YouTuber. I understand. I was ready to part ways with this several times. However, I eventually realized something about the hours that I was putting into this job. A lot of the hours that I was putting in were not getting me reflections of the income that I think, I should have been making in order to justify the decision to stay on it. Some videos, I would spend hours and hours, right? A week and a half, just to make $250. With these videos, a couple hours of work can translate sometimes to a couple $100s. The only thing that matters on YouTube are views. It doesn't matter how hard you worked on it. It doesn't matter how good it looks. The only thing that YouTube cares about is advertising revenue. If the video is not in people's feeds and people aren't watching it from start to finish, then it doesn't matter. They're not going to recommend the video. So my niche, educational Rainbow Six Siege content, dried up very quickly because the game is just not in a very good state right now. However, I couldn't pivot on this main channel to a different game because I had already spent 7 to 6 years getting audience capture for Siege. So it did not matter. If I uploaded an Oscar-winning film on this channel, nobody ever would have heard about it because the click-through rate would have been too low. The click-through rate and the audience engagement would have been so low due to the fact that it's not Rainbow Six that it would have suppressed it, and then I wouldn't have made any money off of it. That is the game. I cannot force YouTube to do what I would like it to do. You have to play by YouTube's rules on this platform or you will crash and burn. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is immune. Mr. Beast is not immune. Mr. Beast has to play by YouTube's rules. Google is in charge. Daddy Google will get advertising revenue, or you can get the fuck off the platform. That's how that works. Some people get around this. A good example, and I'm not talking about Siege anymore, I'm just kind of going off on a tangent. Ryan Chapman is a good example. He does outstanding political content. He does educational political content where he will break down commonly debated political topics and make them easy to understand. He doesn't make advertising revenue off of YouTube. He is entirely Patreon funded. This gives him the ability to make whatever kinds of videos he wants without having to worry about the algorithmic weight of YouTube. He also gets better engagement on these videos due to not having ads, which in turn boosts their searchability and their access in the algorithm, further enhancing his reach. This is a strategy that I have thought about employing for a really long time. I actually do plan on doing it at some point for a channel that is completely separate from gaming. I'm not sure when I'm going to pull the trigger on it. I am going to pursue this soon. But as it stands, I need to get to a point where I have a stable baseline. Doing these videos, doing these Yap sessions for as long as I did for this month of July 2024 proved to me that that is possible. It's not crazy money. I'm not swimming in it, but it's a lot fucking better than how I was doing. And it is a massive relief. It is a massive relief to my mental, to my creative endeavors. Some people are not going to be happy to hear that I'm not putting as much time into this channel as other projects. I'm sorry. I understand if the lack of quality is enough for you to want to pack up and leave. I understand that. Still, that doesn't mean that I have to abandon large projects on this channel. One thing that I will confirm talking to you guys today is I will be doing How to Play Every Operator 2025. Regardless of how Siege shakes out, regardless of whether it drives itself off of a cliff or not, I will be here playing the game with my friends in Staff Hub. Shout out Staff Hub. So I will be recording content and I will be able to make that into something. That's not going to be something that I will work on overnight. I will peck away at it over time, but I would like to confirm yet again, How to Play Every Operator 2025 is going to happen. That's every operator that got added, including the operators that aren't really new operators, Striker and Sentry. Those operators will be covered. Deimos will be covered. The next Greek operator will be covered. Whoever gets reworked in Season 4 of this year will be covered, as well as all previously existing operators. So that begs the question, what the hell am I going to talk about in the meantime? The truth is, I can only do so much. A lot of these videos, the negative ones, did tremendously better than any other kind of content. Why? Not necessarily because of the algorithm, right? It's not because of capitalism. It's just the nature of the situation. People are unhappy with Ubisoft. People are unhappy with what's going on. Some people don't appreciate this level of honesty from a content creator. Some people think that it doesn't give them, you know, a get out of jail free card. That if they have to compromise that much, they should just quit. Usually, those kinds of comments are not worded in a way that's very polite. A lot of the time, those comments are worded in a way that, you know, I understand exactly why they're saying it. Here's what I have to say to that. Just because you hate your day job doesn't mean that I gotta quit mine. I risked a lot to keep GGE going. I got in a car. For 3 days straight, I drove all the way out, halfway across the country to Texas, from my home in West Virginia, because I wanted to pursue my dream of being a filmmaker. It ain't all sunshine and rainbows, but what I'm doing right now is infinitely better than trying to bust my ass getting coffee for some douchebag in Hollywood who's not gonna keep me around. I'd rather be doing what I'm doing now, which is making money doing something entrepreneurial, than writing emails every day begging people for auditions in an apartment that costs $1,500 a month. I'd rather do what I'm doing right now, which gives me enough time to write a book, publish it, and then if some rich guy in LA notices it and says, hey, this looks pretty solid, I can make something with this, then I'll happily be able to say, I made the right call. I'll be able to say I made the right call no matter what, because it was my call, and I did it on my terms, nobody else's. So for all those reasons and more, I will continue to make Rainbow Six Siege content, regardless of whether people are pissed about the game or not, because people are clicking on it, people are watching it, and they like what I have to say. That's enough yapping from me. I gave myself an hour to get this done, and I'm almost at the time limit, so I'm gonna wrap. Thank you for listening to me yap throughout the course of this month, and I will be back soon, promise. Deuces.